Every time we read, be it a single word, a phrase, or a whole sentence, our mind supplies a certain image in which our brain intertwines this certain thread of words with. As it is often said, great writing can paint a picture in the reader's head. But with illustrations embedded within works of literature, we are given the privilege of not only forming our very own vague interpretation of the writer's intentions, but rather a highly saturated depiction of the world they have made within their books, letting us be a part of an otherworldly experience in which we are able to truly idealize ourselves as part of the environment their metaphors and fancy descriptions have made.
Book illustration has existed in some form since the advent of the written word. This tradition that has guided modern book illustration originates in Western literature dating back to 15th century block books, in which the text of a book was carved into the same block as the image. These works were a natural progression from the older illuminated manuscript form, as most famously seen in the Biblia Pauperum, where they look something like medieval graphic novels.
The practice of publishing adult fiction accompanied by representational images is strongly linked with the 18th and 19th century Western literature and the rise of the novel. Of course, trends in both book publishing and visual art shifted in the 20th century, and the practice of publishing visual representations alongside text in adult literature saw a major decline, and book illustration becomes increasingly associated with children's literature and lowbrow or popular writing. At the same time, figurative art was similarly shunned in the art world as outdated and taboo.
A major resurgence of figurative or representative painting marked the end of the 20th century and the start of the 21st. While it became rarer to find illustrations accompanying new works of literary fiction in the mid-20th century, book illustration continued to evolve in less traditional forms. This evolution can be seen in Virgil Finlay's beautifully crafted ink illustrations in sci-fi magazines for stories with titles like The Conquest of the Moon Pool, a work with vitality and detail, echoing Gustave Dor's engravings for Dante and Milton, or Harry Clarke's illustrations for Poe.
It has been fairly obvious that the illustrated literature has been far more celebrated in the past than it has been in the present when it comes to paper-bound books, as it used to be totally normal to include illustrations in literary novels from the 1800s to 1900s. Here are some of the authors and their classics that dominated the illustrative genre's heyday.
Charles Dickens was an English writer and social critic. He created some of the world's best-known fictional characters and is regarded by many as the greatest novelist of the Victorian era. Charles Dickens' Victorian novels were always accompanied by illustrations. One of these is his novel Oliver Twist. In fact, the original cover of Oliver Twist was covered in a dozen small illustrated panels. Dickens is a master storyteller, and his clever descriptions pair well with the often comical images.
Edgar Allan Poe was an American writer considered part of the Romantic movement in the subgenre of dark romanticism. He became an accomplished poet, short story writer, editor, and literary critic who gained worldwide fame for his dark, macabre tales of horror, practically inventing the genre of Gothic literature. His posthumous compilation, Poe's Tales of Mystery and Imagination, specifically restricted to suspenseful tales like the murders of Rue Morgue, paired with Harry Clarke's equally haunting illustrations that effectively embodies the quiet terror and overwhelming claustrophobia of Poe's world, give readers a rather nightmarish hallucinatory experience, making it a victorious dark horse in Gothic literature.
Charles Lutwidge Dodgson, better known by his pen name Lewis Carroll, was an English writer of children's fiction where he was noted for his facility with wordplay, logic, and fantasy. From talking rabbits to Mad Hatters and the Jabberwocky, through the wonderful depictions of fantastic and whimsical events, his book Alice in Wonderland is considered one of the greatest classics that hail from the 1800s to the 1900s. Carroll's descriptions are compelling on their own, but the pictures add to the novel's fanciful tone.
But of course, the Philippines also boasts its fair share of great illustrated literary works. One of the oldest being La Ilustración Filipina, a Spanish-language newspaper published in Manila, Philippines, that ran during the last decade of the Spanish colonial era, and at times during the Philippine Revolution and the beginning of the 20th century under U.S. rule. It was an illustrated weekly newspaper that covered a wide array of social-related topics, both local and international. Many personalities at that time, both Spanish and Filipinos, contributed articles and pictures, although the newspaper also published anonymous articles that in some cases raised a great deal of controversy.
From 1891 to 1895, it was partly edited by Miguel Zaragoza, painter, writer, and teacher, who is considered to be one of the first Filipino to publish a book of poems written in Spanish, and during the Philippine Revolution became one of the editor of the Malolos Constitution. During the years that he acted as the editor of the newspaper, Zaragoza also contributed many writings and drawings, and openly gave preference to the works of native Filipino writers and artists, such as Juan Luna, Fabian de la Rosa, Rafael Enriquez, and Toribio Herrera.
Juan Luna, a Filipino painter, sculptor, and political activist during the Philippine Revolution, was featured on July 28, 1892, cover of the Ilustración in spite of having maintained a strong rivalry with Zaragoza. He contributed many illustrations and writings in successive editions, among them one of the most famous cover pages of the Ilustración, showing a young Filipino seated next to a basket of books and some little girls reading, with Mayon volcano in the background.
Aside from this illustrative forerunner, the Philippines has also been home to comics, a vernacular equivalent to the English illustrated shorts called comics. It is even said that the Philippines' very own national hero, Dr. Jose Rizal, draws satires and parodies directed against the abuses and scruples of the Spanish friars, and that during his stay in Germany. Rizal made several comical drawings that he was sometimes called father of the Philippine comics. While exiled in the Pitan, Rizal was said to have drawn several illustrated scripts such as the Mankukulam and intriguing four-frame presentations about the effects of witchcraft.
More modern descendants of the comics later arose in the Philippines during the 1800s, just after the Second World War, when comic books became especially popular around the world, and Filipino artists were heavily influenced by comic books and ships left behind by American soldiers. What originated from this became household names well known today with works like Darna, Jezebel, Plastic Man, and Captain Barbell, gaining local fame and conquering silver screen.
Despite the fact that we were influenced by the Western trend, the Philippine illustrated genre isn't by any chance a mere shadow of its predecessor. What makes illustrated literature from the West different from the ones in the Philippine literature is that, in the former, it is mostly about fictional and almost fairy tale-like storylines, while illustrated works from the Philippines mostly center on their colorful history, diverse culture, and unique mythology laden with a tinge of the country's harrowing reality.
In the contemporary period, illustrated literature have been downplayed into being squabbed and contested as cartoons, and has migrated this genre into an unfurnished idea of it being exclusive for children's literature. But as this new era arises in which Gen Z ideals have become much more reminiscent of the past, the use of art forms and literature have made a rather satisfying comeback.
This return of illustrations in modern literature has been tangled with a rather novel edge. This can be seen in the famed variety of webtoons and manga that has gained popularity more than ever. Applications and sites such as Lezin, Webtoon, and Crunchyroll indulges the new generation with illustrated gems such as One Piece, which is a Japanese manga series written and illustrated by Ichiro Oda and has received praise for its storytelling, characterization, and humor, making it a multi-awarded piece ranked by critics, reviewers, and readers as one of the best manga of all time. Backing this up, The series has broken several publishing records, including the highest initial print run of any book in Japan, and in 2015 set a Guinness World Record. It is also held as the best-selling manga for 11 consecutive years from 2008 to 2018, making it the best-selling manga series in history.
Another one is A Bastard. A webtoon written by Carnby Kim and drawn by Yang Chan Wang, this genre-bending roller coaster that floors almost every reader that comes across. It has been dubbed one of the most mind-boggling and exciting thrill ride in the manhwa space, easily making it one of the most essential reads amongst top webtoons online.
And of course, the Philippines doesn't let down the 13, a Filipino comic series written by Butch Tan and illustrated by Kadjo Baldisemo, that has bagged national awards and critically acclaimed as a brave attempt on making a whole new wave, and a rather modern acclaim of a renaissance on Filipino comics, as it has been adapted by Netflix, making its media debut quite sensational.
Surely, with these hidden illustrated diamonds being polished into its brightest luster to demand attention from the new era of readers who is always on the search for new trends, it isn't as ambitious to say that the illustrated literature genre is set to reach its peak in the 21st century and is not going to disappear anytime soon.